Hey everybody, I'm Kolbe. You might remember me from last year. I helped out with PSR. I would sit behind the desk as you guys walked in and just say hello. I made one of these videos last year, so you might remember that. Today we're going to be talking about ecclesiology, a big word, but I think it's pretty simple and you'll get exactly what it means by the end of today. So the things we're going to cover in class today are the hierarchy of the church. So just the order of responsibility and who's in charge of what, pretty much. And then we're also going to talk about the sacraments a little bit, how the Holy Spirit is involved in all of this authority. And then we're going to talk about the role of grace. So your teacher will handle some of that, but what I want to talk to you about is the hierarchy. So what the hierarchy of the church is this layer of authority. So at the very top, you think of who is the most holy person alive right now. Some people might say the Dalai Lama or I don't know who else, but I would think the Pope. You would probably think the Pope too. But so the Pope, that's where we start at the top, the very top of this hierarchy of the church. We have the Pope. So the Pope is elected by this college of cardinals. So not college like a school, but college like a group of people. And the Pope is the Bishop of Rome, but he's also the Vicar of Christ on earth. So he is kind of like the head honcho in charge of the church. And so underneath the Pope would be the cardinals. And so the cardinals are not necessarily ordained. So the Pope is a bishop. So he's been ordained a priest, he's been ordained a deacon, and he's been ordained a bishop. So he's an ordained official. But the cardinals aren't necessarily ordained. It's not an ordained position. All the cardinals that we have right now just so happen to be ordained. So what the cardinals do, they basically elect the next pope, and they're kind of like advisors to the pope. And typically the pope comes from the college of cardinals. They tend to elect a cardinal to be the pope, but it doesn't have to be that way. If the cardinals decided they wanted you to be the pope, you'd be ordained a deacon, and then you'd be ordained a priest, and then you'd be ordained a bishop, and then they would let you become the pope. So it's possible that could happen. But usually the Pope comes from someone who's already been ordained, deacon, priest, bishop, and then he becomes a Pope. And so underneath the cardinals, what's underneath the cardinals? Then we have archbishops. Archbishops they're ordained bishops, but they have a bigger area that they are in charge of. So we have these things called dioceses, and we're in the Diocese of Baton Rouge here at St. Margaret. And so the Diocese of Baton Rouge is a part of the greater archdiocese. It's overseen by the Archdiocese of New Orleans and Archbishop Amen. So while we're our own diocese, we still kind of fall under this jurisdiction of the archdiocese. But they have this word called delegation. And so the church loves to delegate people to do. So the small guys handle small affairs, the big guys handle big affairs. So archdiocese handles some bigger things and then allows the diocese to handle smaller things. So the archbishop is in charge of an archdiocese. And so underneath the archbishop you have bishops. And so the bishops tend to be in charge of dioceses. So the Bishop of Baton Rouge would be Bishop Duca. And so his ministry is to oversee the salvation of all of the souls in the Diocese of Baton Rouge. So our diocese goes from Napoleonville and Labadyville, and that's close to home at Thibodeau, all the way to New Roads and Port Allen. So it covers a very, very wide area. And so Bishop Duca is in charge of all of that land. But Bishop Duca knows that he can't take care of every single person in that space. So he ordains priests. And so from his power, he comes from the line of St. Peter. So from the time of Jesus gives this power to Peter, who hands it on to his successors, who keeps handing this down and down until we have Bishop Duca. So Bishop Duca has the power to allow other people to serve in his ministry. So while Bishop Duca is the high priest, he ordains other priests so that they can celebrate the Mass when Bishop Duca is not able to, and so they can forgive sins when Bishop Duca isn't able to. And so that all comes from Bishop Duca's power, but the priests do it individually. And so the priests, even in their own parishes, the priests run parishes. So if you have Father Jamin and Father Paul here, but they can't do everything here. They're limited, very limited, especially Father Jamin's doing everything. He's running around with like a chicken with his head chopped off, trying to get everything done. And so he needed Father Paul to come in and help him. And even with Father Paul, they still need some help. So that's where you get the ordination of deacons. The deacons are ordained by the bishop as well. And they assist the priests in the liturgies. Two things that they can do: they can baptize and they can witness marriages. So the priest doesn't need to be present for those two sacraments. A deacon can do those. But the sacrament, the Holy Eucharist, the priest and the bishops are the one that do that. And the deacons just assist in that. You might see them standing off to the side, bringing the chalice to the altar and setting the altar, or reading the gospel and preaching. Deacons can do that as well. And so then underneath the deacons we have the laity. That's you and me. And so our job is to assist in the areas that the priests and the deacons and the bishops are unable to reach. So as a member of the laity, I exist in the world. And so the priest is in the world also, but he's still super limited. And so while when you grow up, whatever you end up being, if you become a priest or a deacon or a bishop or the pope, then you will have your own things that you need to do. But as a lay faithful, this would include anyone who's not ordained. This includes the women that are in the church. And so our job is to go out into the world and bring Christ to the people, to the areas where priests and bishops and deacons can't reach. So we assist around the parish in different ministries. And then also when we go to work, we bring Christ to work. When we go to school, we bring Christ to school, because you're not going to school with priests, are you? So you got to bring Christ there. You might see your priest, like if you go to one of the Catholic schools around here, you might see a priest around there every now and then. But in the classroom, you're not having a priest there. And at lunch, you're not eating lunch with your priest every day. So it's your job as a member of the laity to bring Christ to those areas. And then another kind of area, you'll get into this maybe when you talk about vocations, is religious life. And so religious life isn't its own section of the hierarchy, but it's an interesting part. So you have this difference between monks and priests, or brothers and priests. Monks and brothers they wear these long gowns, kind of, with a rope around them. And so you have monks and brothers, and then you have nuns and sisters. So nuns and sisters are not ordained, but they're religious. And so a lot of their role is to pray for the rest of the church. So while the rest of the church is performing these acts, they're doing tangible things, a lot of the religious are praying and sustaining the graces, providing the graces, from asking God to provide the graces for these actions to be held out. And so sisters and nuns, not ordained, but they have a very important role in the church. Monks and brothers, they play a very similar role to nuns and sisters, but they also can be ordained. You can be ordained and a brother, ordained and a monk. So you could be a monk and a priest at the same time, or a monk and a deacon at the same time, or just a monk at the same time. And so that's different from the laity. That's something called religious. So for the rest of the class, your teacher is going to talk to you about those things we talked about in the beginning, the Holy Spirit's role in all of this. Where does this power come from? This authority that the Pope has, that he gives to the rest of the people. Where does that all come from? And so for the rest of the class, pay attention, learn something. I hope you learned something from what I had to say, and hopefully I'll see you guys again soon.